Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to the tank review on the IS-6, which is the first Russian Tier 4 battle rating 7.0 heavy tank in the premium branch. The IS-6 is a very basic tank and a lot of stats are not very good looking when you compare it to other tanks. Furthermore, it is like an old school tank in a new era meta, at least that's at the first glance. The truth is, this tank performs outstandingly well in the current meta of War Thunder. Short range brawling, very aggressive playstyle, going for the objective, and just simply most of the time one-shotting your enemies that you most of the time face. Furthermore, the armor on this tank is incredibly bouncy, incredibly trollish, and borderline overpowered. Yes, in a full up tier or against certain enemies at its own battle rating or lower, it can get killed, but so does every other tank. The thing that surprises me is the combination of speed, firepower, survivability, durability, and just overall fun. Is this vehicle worth in comparison to other Russian premium tanks? And how does it work really out? And how can you take out this monstrosity when you face it? That all and some ace tanker gameplay in both arcade and realistic, and together with a full rundown on the statistics of this tank towards its major opponents on the battlefield will be topic of this tank review. One thing that I have to point out for newer players or viewers of this channel. Now War Thunder is released. But back a few years ago, when there were just the German and the Soviet tanks, there was one tank that completely ruled the battlefield and had since then several nerfs and armor and also hull kind of reworks, so it doesn't live up to the name. And that was the IS-4. In short, the IS-6 is the IS-4 on steroids, faster reloading gun, and yeah, it just is like the old days. This tank is nearly unstoppable. However, I did a little bit of testing and I come to an awful conclusion. The nation that absolutely suffers at the hands of this tank are the Germans. And even the Americans have a hard time facing it in a head-on. So, without further ado, let's get on with the tank review. So first of all, let's talk about the armor, and there's actually a lot to talk about. But first of all, let's just admire this tank and its simple design. It's an octagonal hull shape, at least on the upper part. The turret is rather flat and rounded and angled, and overall the silhouette of the tank is rather low profile. Then there is the lower plate, 120 millimeters thickness of 53 degrees angling, resulting in such an effective thickness of around about 240 millimeters that even the Jagdtiger will not go through. The 20-pounder has still a decent chance with APDS and the L7 gun with APDS as well. However, it is a tricky shot. It's a lot of Soviet angling going on. It just doesn't allow you to go through. This is not a weak spot. Then there is the upper hull, 100 millimeters thickness. That allows even the hash penetration of the 90 millimeter hash round from the RE251. And 65 degrees of angling means that the effective thickness is over 210 millimeters. That means in most cases you can't penetrate here with the heat round from the 90mm Americans, the one with 210 millimeters. But you can penetrate the turret front. I will come to this in a moment. Then there is here the center part, which is 110 millimeters thick. So the RE251 with a direct hit will not go through there. Keep that in mind. But all other hash shells in the game will go through. This might act as spaced armor, but I would not rely on it. Then there is the side cheeks, and when you face your enemy directly, even the APDS from the L7 gun will not go through. Just very high penetrating APDS rounds, maybe from the Conqueror, but from the Chieftain for sure, at this exact angle will go through, or high penetrating heat rounds. But you know, even the 320mm from the American 90mm at higher tiers will not go through. Just keep that in mind. You know, this tank is very well protected. Then there is the side. The upper part also 100mm thick, so with something like a 17-pounder without APDS or from something like a Panther gun, you still might get some ricochets at some slight angles. Then the lower part here is 100mm thick, so you can angle it quite effectively in this part, but then this part here is unangled, but still 62 degrees of angling is a lot. We also have additional tracks, additional road wheels, additional side skirts that protect you from low penetrating heat rounds and also hash rounds. And then we also have here some structural steel of chassis with 60mm that surprisingly absorbs a lot of damage. And then there is a secret thing, because there is the lower part of the hull. It's difficult to see. You just can see it right here on the back of the vehicle. I might zoom out a little bit. Where is it? There it is. That's 20mm, but there is 70 degrees of angling going on. But it's so thin that a lot of overmatch and armor interaction rules get into it, and you can shoot it. The basic rule is from the middle of the road wheel up until to where the teeth begin of the tracks, you have the 20mm overlay, but again there is 60mm additional armor, so please think about this depending on the exact ammunition type. The back of the vehicle is here as well, protected by 100mm of plating, then a lot of overlays going on here. 60mm on the lower and the upper rear plate, still protected from the overwhelming majority of AAAs, and then we also have some additional tracks here, just to make sure that this tank has a good amount of protection all around. The engine deck is 20mm thick. That is not spectacularly good, but it's also not extreme paper. But you know, there are no weak spots, so that means you're safe from machine gun fire and 20mm cannon fire most of the time. But again, rockets and bombs will do damage, as well as very high caliber aircraft cannons. Then we also have 20mm of deck armor, so to speak, here around the turret ring, and that gives away a secret weak spot. It's not very obvious, but if you are a very good shot, you can load a 105mm HE round that has 20mm plus of penetration, or especially 120, 122mm, or the German 128mm HE round, and you try to splash around about here, it will splash down through the 20mm and detonate the tank very reliable. But it's a chancy shot. And now we come to the turret, and it's stated here with 100 or even 200mm of armor. That is true for this turret or this gun shield here, but outside from that it's 150mm like everywhere, except on the back where it's 100, so even that is very good. There is a lot of angling, so you have to shoot very precisely. The obvious weak spot would be like between those two holes for the gunner. Don't shoot there. There's currently a bug going on. You can't penetrate here reliable with something between 200 and 250mm solid shots. For example, the 20-pounder with the solid shot, not the APDS, and the German long 88 APHE round. They do not go through here. And on the other side, you might also hit the machine gun port. It's not very reliable. This is one of the few Soviet tanks that I tend to shoot here with APCR. 270mm of APCR penetration will do the job, but again the damage output might be not sufficient to take out this tank in one shot, depending on how much rounds are stored in the back of the turret. I will talk about this in a moment. Furthermore, you might say, well, I just shoot the cupolas. Bad choice. When you hit here this one, you might not do enough damage, and this one where the gunner and the commander sits, and maybe the remaining ammo racks. In the middle there is also a little bug going on, so to speak. The optics will eat a lot of the shells. Just very brutal rounds, maybe from the Yak Tiger, but even that has a chance to not go through here. So you are better off to shoot here and here. So overall you can see the armor is very very strong. So where to shoot this? Again, hash here, but not here, but here. APDS, high penetration rounds. Just try to go again somewhere there. We will come to this in a moment when we talk about the interior. Then there is a very small spot here where you can penetrate even with a Panther. But again, it's a very small target, and there is even a potential very small overlay, and that will eat up any shot. The other side, this side, looks here a bit better, especially for long 88s. You have here in this area a better chance to penetrate, but you know, those are just a few pixels. At long range, this tank is practically untouchable. Now you also can try to shot trap here with normal rounds, but HE shot trapping is more reliable than AP shot trapping. You can do it, but you also have such a very high chance of just the shot getting eaten up. And also you can see 430 millimeters of effective armor, and there is another 500 millimeters of effective armor behind that. So that part can even eat 8 TGMs, but then the splash will go through from the HE blast and detonate the tank. So this tank is very tough. The side of the turret as well might occur some random ricochets from long 88s or 17 pounders that you face, 20 pounders, you know, without APDS. So you need a lot of penetration to go through. So what about the interior? Oh, well, we have just 4 crew members, the driver sitting in the middle. Then we also have the gunner and the commander on the right hand side, and the loader on the left hand side. We have 30 rounds in total. The majority of warheads are stowed in the back of the turret, and you can remove like half of your ammunition, or like 17 rounds, and then those 4 warheads will remain. If you just take with you 13 rounds, all the ammunition out of the back of the turret gets removed, and what remains are those 4 warheads, those 4 warheads, and those 4 warheads, totaling up to 12. One is registered as being in the breach, together with all those propellant charges, and all those others will be removed. So that is your only chance, and that makes the back of the tank more survivable against something like APDS rounds. And then suddenly this part here and this part here, you can shoot with APDS without suffering any kind of real damage to the tank. So then there is also the fuel tanks and the engine together with the transmission in the back of the vehicle. And while they love to burn, they don't blow up. That's at least what I figured it out. And that is the tank. So very tough, very rugged, especially a surprising amount of survivability. You do not get any kind of benefit from the so-called loader bug. So you just have one loader. If you're down to 2 crew members, I highly advise you to go into a cap circle and refill one of your, or replenish one of your crew members to have at least 3 remaining, because if you're down to 2, the reload gets insanely long. I think that the IS-6 is a very capable tank if you play it right, and that is a very direct, aggressive playstyle, going for the objective and even sometimes flanking the enemy. Of course, the tank has drawbacks, but it also has a lot of advantages, especially when we compare it to tanks like the IS-2, the IS-3 and IS-4, which are not listed here, the American premium tank, the T-29, the German Diesel King Tiger, and even the other Russian medium premium tank, the T-44-122, and even the T-54-1947, to which it is kind of similar in terms of overall character. So first of all, we have here a really strong engine, 700 horsepower. Of course, the T-29 and the King Tigers and the Carnarvon have stronger engines, but the majority of them are also heavier tanks with 51.1 tons. This is a rather lightweight heavy tank. In this respect, it is a little bit similar to the IS-2. However, the horsepower to ton ratio is a phenomenal 13.7. And when you look at it, that is the same as the Carnarvon. But keep the comparison with the Carnarvon in mind. So the IS-2, the T-29 and the King Tigers are slower. Even the 10.5 it has nearly 1 horsepower per ton less. The top speed is really good. 44 kilometers an hour makes it even faster than the German King Tigers in their top speed. And you just leave the T-29 and the Carnarvon in the dust. Of course, you get surpassed by the Russian medium tanks with 50 and 60 kilometers respectively. In this comparison, the tank has the best reverse speed with minus 17 kilometers an hour. And sadly, it has no neutral steering, but you can see in terms of the overall horsepower to ton ratio, top speed, reverse speed, this tank is rather maneuverable, and so you can nearly drive it like a medium, especially in arcade. This tank is just completely insane, and that is a joy to play, I have to say. But what about the firepower? Now, the firepower is special, and I have to point this out. This is your well-known Russian 122mm gun. However, it's a D30T and not your D25T. In this respect, I will compare it to the IS-2 Revenge, because the IS-2 Revenge has basically the very exact same stats as the IS-3 and the IS-4 respectively. And you see that the reload rate is significantly lower. However, I want to point a few things out. The caliber is important when you have a solid round or an APHE round because of how it interacts with armor. There is the overmatch mechanic. If you have 3 times the caliber of the armor thickness, you have a partial overmatch, and 6 times the caliber, that means you have a complete overmatch, and so caliber size matters. Furthermore, there is this 30% interaction rule. That means if your shell is 30% larger than the armor it interacts, it has a massively reduced chance of bouncing. And that explains the overall difference in terms of performance between something like the German Long 88 with the high penetration but low caliber for the same ammunition type in comparison to the 122mm. But let's go through the stats. So in this respect, in this comparison, it has the biggest caliber with 122mm, followed up by all the 105 and 100mm in this respect. We just have 30 rounds, and that is typically Soviet low. For example, if you compare it even with the medium tanks. And the reload, that is a little bit surprising. Let's talk a little bit about the reload. Every tanker knows that the Russian 122mm gun is cursed with a long reload. And even with an ace crew, you go just down to 20.8 seconds for the IS-2, the IS-3, the IS-4, and a lot of the tank destroyers being equipped with this kind of gun. There are 2 exceptions so far, that being the T10M, of course, and also the SU 122-54. I did not state them because then the comparison sheets would just explode in terms of size. So you have here with the IS-6 around about just 3/4 of the reload of the IS-2. That means that the IS-2 has respectively a 30% longer reload compared to the IS-6, and that means you surprise enemies with your rather short reload. However, in comparison to all the other tanks, your reload is still long. Surprisingly enough, you are not far off from the reload from the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II. But again, the Tiger II has a too long reload in my opinion, especially because it was stated to have kind of an auto-loading mechanism. But it completely outclasses the T-44 122, but it does not really come too close to the mobility. However, the turret rotation speed with 14 degrees is not too bad for a heavy tank. Yes, all the other heavy tanks have a little bit faster turret rotation speed between 13 and 32 degrees percent, but I think it's still really good, and it outclasses the T-54 1947 in this respect. So you have one of the best mobility aspects of a heavy tank with very, very good armor that has not a lot of real weak spots, which then also are a little bit bugged in this respect, because the optics behind that just eat all the shrapnels and shots from lower caliber rounds. One thing that really sucks about this tank is the gun depression. -3 degrees is disastrously bad. However, the playstyle of a heavy tank is mostly to drive on flat terrain, in city brawling situations, and also in close quarters. It does not really affect the tank's playstyle too much as you would expect it. I think the gun depression of the T54 and T44 122 hurts them more, despite being better because of their medium tank playstyle, but that is just my opinion. The gun elevation is with 20 degrees joint best with the IS-2 Revenge and the Carnarvon. The elevation speed is kind of average with 4 degrees per second. Now let's talk about the ammunition, and the first round is the BR-471 APHE round. It is a 25 kilogram warhead with a muzzle velocity of 795 meters per second, and the TNT equivalent of the high explosive charge is 272 grams of TNT equivalent. Furthermore, the fuse sensitivity is 15 millimeters, which is good, but the penetration is just 200 millimeters at 10 meters and under 180 millimeters at 500 meters. This is not your best warhead. The second and last ammunition type in terms of armor-piercing rounds is the BR-471B, which is an APHE BC shell, and it has improved penetration of 207 millimeters, maybe caused by 800 meters per second, rather insignificant improved muzzle velocity. The warhead also weighs 25 kilograms, and it also has 272 grams of TNT equivalent filler. And then also the fuse delay is 15 millimeters. And this is the APHE round that you should use. Nothing but this round. It has a little bit of improved penetration, and let's just talk a little bit about the meta of the tank. The second APHE round, which is the last armor-piercing round for this tank, is the BR-471B round, which is an APHE BC round, well known from all the IS-2 tanks, and it is also a 25 kilogram heavy warhead. At 800 meters per second, it has a slight improved muzzle velocity, but it's still rather slow, especially in comparison to other nations' tanks and their guns. The TNT equivalent is the same, 272 grams, is fantastic, and when penetrating an enemy tank will cause massive damage, and in 95% of the cases just simply one-shot it, especially when you aim for the crew compartment. The fuse sensitivity again is 15 millimeters, which is fantastic. The caliber again helps it out greatly in this respect because of the armor interaction rules. You will not bounce so often like with, for example, a lower caliber shell. 207 millimeters is not that much improvement, but it actually helps the tank out greatly. The one tank that causes the most trouble for this tank is not the King Tiger or the T-29, but a tank that a lot of people forgot about. The Ferdinand is a hard nut to crack, and that tank is actually the one that can fill now the long-range sniper gun. Sadly, the Ferdinand has a lot of other enemies that just will go through through its armor, and in this case, the Ferdinand kind of struggles in the role of the Messias to be able to put down the IS-6 flood. Now in a moment I will compare this shell to all other nations' shell types, but before that I will talk a little bit about what the benefit of this tank is, and that is a Soviet tank. That means it doesn't face other Soviet tanks, except in arcade. But for arcade there is one good thing. You can't get killed by other Soviet vehicles in return that easily. Furthermore, the only tank that might give you trouble is the mouse, but you still can penetrate the mouse with this shell from the turret front at close quarters, flat on, because of the armor reduction value. That also means that you can penetrate a King Tiger's turret front over 500 meters distance. It's just too much balance in this respect. Yeah, sarcasm off. However, for arcade, there is another solution that I also talked about the armor review, and that is the third shell type. The third and last shell type is the OF471 HE round, and this is also a 25 kilogram warhead. It also has 800 meters per second muzzle velocity, and the TNT filling is 3.6 kilograms with a fuse delay of 0.1 meter and 0.1 millimeters of fuse sensitivity. It is able to penetrate 36 millimeters of armor, and that causes, because of the big blast and the size, like the APHE round, hull break, and it splashes down through a lot of plating. So this is your trick to take on Soviet vehicles in arcade, and you actually have the reload that's quite on the edge in terms of making the sensible switch, but then it also interacts with the rather limited ammunition count that this tank can carry with it. So this is not a shell that you should forget about it, but it has limited use in practice. The last data sheet is a comparison of the ammunition types, and you can see that the IS-6, for its battle rating, has actually inferior ammunition selection, and there is a lot of red. Now, the gun is practically the same as on the IS-2 Revenge and the T-44-122, and we can see that it has the lowest amount of penetration, but the second highest TNT equivalent, just the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II, is better in this respect. Also, the muzzle velocity is the slowest. The penetration of the HE round is, due to the caliber, the best, but again, the muzzle velocity is the slowest. Furthermore, this tank lacks any kind of APDS, APCR, or heat-FS. The only tank that actually has heat-FS or heat in this respect is the Tiger II-H SLA-16, but it just has 110 millimeters of penetration, being rather useless. So you can see the ammunition selection is limited, but in practice the shell just simply works, and when you penetrate your enemy, which is very likely, then you just simply delete it. Just don't shoot at the turret front of a T-29, T-32. The spall liner or the spall shield behind the actual gun mantle will eat up the fragments. Just shoot the lower plate, you will delete it. Just shoot any kind of King Tiger into the turret, you will most likely blow up the entirety of the tank. Either the fuel tanks, even on the diesel King Tiger in the current state of the game, or just simply any kind of ammunition. For example, the warheads in the back of the turret of the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II, and Carnarvons and other nations' tanks just simply can't resist this shell. It is not the very best shell. In this respect, the best performance goes to the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II's APHE shell with 247 millimeters of penetration, muzzle velocity of 1005 meters per second, and also 343.2 grams of TNT equivalent. However, the tank is much more fragile, slower, has effectively not the same amount of protection and weight on the battlefield as an IS-6 that just can shift around wildly and delete any kind of position effectively, even in an up tier. And again, the major benefit of this tank is that you don't face any kind of Russian tank in your IS-6. If you choose to go into arcade with this tank, other Russian tanks are the problem. But then again, can they penetrate you? That is the question. So you actually can ignore so many tanks in your advance, and that is the crucial part about this tank. It plays like, for example, to exaggerate a little bit, it plays like a mouse on steroids, or an IS-4 on steroids. And that just is so disastrous for the enemy team, and no wonder German teams die at the moment within 5 minutes. Just to prove my point, here are my personal statistics. In 20 battles, I died 14 times, so practically a third. I survived from the start to finish, and I won like 2/3 of the battles, and I killed 67 tanks. So the kill to death ratio for all of you specialists out there is 4.5 to 1. That is exceptionally high, and just shows how effective the tank is currently in the terms of a matchmaker and overall effective on the battlefield. Is this tank worth in terms of purchasing? I think yes at the moment, but also I have to say I expect some changes sooner or later. So the matchmaking might shift around, additional tanks might come into the game. You are still vulnerable, and you have to know how to retreat and to attack and so on. You saw it in the gameplay up until this point. The tank has an aggressive playstyle, but it is not idiot proof, but it is very simple to play indeed. So let's just simply have a look at this gameplay here, and I want you to have a good look at the mobility and where actually the fight is happening. This is on Port Novorossiysk. This is the best battle that I had so far, and I'm quite sure that if I play enough I will end up with numerous double ace gameplays, as long as there are enough players for me to kill. But this battle is a synonym for how this tank performs. The rest of the tanks in the tech tree support it. The mobility is there, the firepower is there, the protection is there, the results are just there, the matchmaking supports you in conjunction with how, for example, German teams suffer. You just can race towards the enemy and put insane amounts of pressure on them, and very often they just simply have no way of dealing with you. Against lower tier vehicles, you're the absolute dominator, and even vehicles at the same battle rating or even higher battle rating very often struggle, while you just pump in the 122 and they are simply dead. And this gameplay just shows it. So there is another T-34 coming. Side shot. This shot is very impressive. It goes through the 76.2mm side armor at an angle where I could guarantee you that the long 88 would have bounced. I blinded and wiggled around the enemy so that he screwed up the shot with the machine gun, and now I delete the M41 Walker Bulldog. I retreat again. I try to blind the enemy a little bit with machine gun fire, but he seems to be a low resolution player because he finds the gun exactly, and that annoys me a little bit. Look at the reverse speed, 17 kilometers an hour backwards. That is just fantastic. I mark him for the rest of my teams while I am repairing, and that means he overextends the actual front line. We actually got C around about now. That actually takes the majority of time of the battle in the first few minutes of the battle, and the RE-251 kills the Super Pershing from the front, I guess, with heat. And you know, that is also a failure of game mechanics, I assume. I'm not an expert on heat, but 3 layers of armor, that should really reduce the amount of effectiveness on such a shell. And now you could see the point that I was making. I was caught in the reload when my gun barrel was damaged, not the gun breech. And I had to repair for the full, I guess, 30 seconds. And now I have to reload. But the reload is relatively fast for a 122mm, so that I can advance. And you can see I am keeping up with all the medium tanks and some troll tanks, and I'm charging in. I have no fear. Now, situational awareness is something that I advise. This is not an idiot tank, but this is a tank for very aggressive playing, and everybody that enjoys aggressive play will enjoy this tank. That was a little bit of overkill. I potentially could have done it with the machine guns as well, but this little bugger must die. If he has heat, he is one of the biggest threats. And then this AAA I can simply ignore. Other tanks will struggle with it. And there you can see hull break for my 5th kill. That's the ace, simply like that. And it did not even receive any kind of damage despite being shot numerous times. And now I see the explosion. The King Tiger hits him, but doesn't delete him. I delete him with a nice side shot. That is the power of the 122. It always was powerful, and I love that I can have it on a tank with a faster reload, faster mobility, but practically the same protection as on an IS-4, effectively. That tells you a lot. Especially against Germans with their kind of regular kind of rounds, like the Jagdtiger, like the 10.5 centimeter King Tiger or the 88mm Tiger, and all the other tanks that have that are based on this weapon system, they just simply have an extremely hard time. And then there are also the so-called weak spots that if you go for them, like you learned it with the German tanks up until this point, always shoot the flat turret part, they just get eaten up by the optics or some overlay or bounce at the slightest occurrence of an angle. Those are 2 layers of concrete wall, and the shell perfectly connects into this Jumbo Sherman and deletes him for my 7th kill, just like that. And that was the battle. However, for a long time we had to wait for the next spawn. So I cut out like 4 minutes of just waiting around for the last player, and I must not screw up that shot. So I wait, I predict where he is going. And there I wiggled too long with the gun, I was in risk of danger hitting the wall, but now he stops. Perfect side shot on the turret, deleting all 4 crew members for my 8th kill. And that was simply the battle. That was the last player. Then he jumped into an aircraft and did, fly around, and yeah, we never catched him. A quick look at the results, and for my 8 kills and 2 kill assists, I got 79,000 silver lines and 7,882 modification research points. I'm currently not researching anything, and this is a pretty damn good result. And it was easy. It was easy, and the overwhelming majority of battles that I played were like that. So, and that also secured me first place with 2,372 score points, and I did not die. This is the IS-6. It is a very, very nice tank. I highly recommend it, especially when we look at the remaining Soviet premium tanks. It actually outclasses every one of those. It is better than the IS-2 Revenge, better than the T-44-122, although it depends on the playstyle. The T-34-100 is awesome, but it is the remnants of 6.7 for the Russians, since the IS-2 mod 1944 and the Revenge got down-tiered. It's not really that viable anymore. The SU-122P gets also completely outclassed by the IS-6 in terms of effective performance at its current battle rating. The Type 62 is a reward vehicle. The KV-122 is more of a choke tank, and it also has a much lower battle rating. So the IS-6 is a force to be reckoned with, and it can get backed up by the really fast Object 906, especially when it's fully upgraded with heat. It still can perform really well at 7.3, where it can join the battle with the T-54-47, the IS-3, the SU-122-54. So you see, there is absolutely no reason to not buy this tank if you want one Russian heavy tank, because it plays by the rules as far as Russian heavy tank goes. It just improves that, and that is my criticism at this point. Together with the T-90, together with the T-29, the RU-251, and also the Stridswagen 81, this tank is responsible for the death of 6.7. There is a massive power creep going on in sheer firepower, survivability, and mobility, and this tank can dominate them all if necessary. That's it for me today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Let me know in the comment section your opinion about this tank. Is it really overpowered, or is it really weak? What are your experiences with it and against it? And yeah, at the end of the day, I just can say, give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we will see each other on the battlefields of War Thunder.